Continue today to bombard Gaza from the air and press forward with its ground assault. Also today, the Israelis announced they killed a prominent financier of Hamas in an airstrike. The Hamas-controlled health authority in Gaza claims that the death toll there is nearing 20,000. This comes as Israel is under increasing pressure from the U.S. and the United Nations to ease their ferocious bombardment of Gaza in favor of a more surgical approach to eradicating Hamas. We're joined now by Aaron Cohen, an Israeli special operations veteran. Aaron, thanks for joining us once again here on Centerpoint.
Good to see you, Joe. Good to see you.
Aaron, as you just heard, that Israel is being urged to be more surgical. Can they keep their objectives in eradicating Hamas if the bombardment eases?
Well, it's sure. It's just going to take longer. The longer the White House administration, the longer Biden, the longer Blinken puts the handcuffs or thickens the handcuffs on Israel, the longer it's going to take. And so what happened here, Joe, is that Hamas has been playing at the heartstrings of the international community for the last 70-plus days. You got to remember, Israel experienced practically a genocide, almost over 1,200 people murdered, women, babies, children, hostages dragged into those tunnels, over 200. And the fact is that there's a tremendous amount of psychological warfare that they've been deploying, which has creeped its way into the White House. It's a powerful medium, and social media is moving all those pieces, and it's turning the world against Israel's ability to defend itself. So Israel can still carry out its objective, and it will. They're just going to have to rely a little bit more on ground forces, a little more on those special operations units, a little bit more on that specialized units that focus on what's called limited penetration room clearing. Is a video that just went viral of a special operations member who killed 2 Hamas terrorists after getting almost hit by a frag grenade in the Shujaiya camp in Gaza, very active area. So Israel will handle business. They'll continue doing what they're doing. But what the White House doesn't want is they don't want the images. They don't want the visual, because it creates a lot of pressure. People are out there calling Joe Genocide Joe now. So I get where the White House is coming from. It's a tough situation, and I understand Bibi very well also. That's a tough situation. But the fact is, Israel's got to conduct operations, and Israel's taking the gloves off.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the U.S., Aaron, because the last time you were on here a couple of weeks ago, you said the U.S. needs to take a step down and let Israel take care of its business. And recently you brought up Biden. You said he just needs to shut his mouth. So is the U.S. criticism of Israel undermining Israel's war effort right now, with everything they say?
Yeah, Joe, yes, Joe, it is. The criticism that the U.S. is putting on Israel. So basically, the Biden White House wants to have its cake and eat it too. Listen, there is no time frame when it comes to counterterrorism operations, Joe. I've been around the business a long time, over 25 years in the counterterrorism space, in the intelligence space, in the direct action space. And I'll tell you, the slogan of Hamas, Joe, in Arabic is Khat al-Mut, which means to the death, on that little green bandana. And so when you're dealing with a terrorist organization who's so fundamentally radicalized and motivated to die, and to them that's a treasure, then you've got to be able to do whatever it takes to be able to crush that ideology, both in Gaza and abroad. And that will have direct implications here. The longer it takes for Israel to be able to eradicate Hamas completely, the 40,000-plus armed militant terrorists in Gaza, in those 1,200 tunnels down there, those terror tunnels, the greater the risk to U.S. national security, because as you've seen here in the United States, the pro-Hamas rallies have continuously grown. And it's just a question of time until Islamists and jihadists start to take advantage of those protests, and we start to see some terror here. And it can be very simple. It can be active shooters starting to pop off in and around those crowds. And the onus is going to eventually fall on U.S. law enforcement, who I've trained for over 20 years. I'm also a deputy reservist for 15 years with the Sheriff's Agency on the East Coast. And I can tell you that the onus is going to fall on these SWAT teams for active shooter response. There's a lot of weapons in the United States, and I don't get political, but there's a lot of weapons in the United States that are legally owned, and it don't take much to put a magazine in and start opening fire. And so the longer Biden keeps the cuffs and thickens those handcuffs on Israel's ability to conduct aggressive operations, and Joe, aggression is a tactic. But nobody likes it when Israel hits back. And that's what we're seeing right now. But Israel's going to continue to do its work. But now U.S. law enforcement needs to start getting serious about their training. making sure that their law enforcement agencies, not just their SWAT teams, but their patrol officers and school resource officers, are able to respond to multiple active shooter threats, because that's how easily this could pop off in multiple locations at potentially the same time as the craziness here continues to expand. And they need to be able to function under the highest degrees of stress. So that response training needs to be behavioral based. Also, the off-duty law enforcement element's a big piece. In Israel, every off-duty officer acts as a force multiplier. These caps right here, which fold up and go in your pocket, these get worn by off-duty officers to avoid fratricide. It's the ugliest thing you've ever seen, but they go on the head, and they're used specifically to be able to act as force multipliers to avoid accidental blue-on-blue fire in the event that a plainclothed or off-duty officer responds to an active threat. So Israel, the U.S. has got to start looking at their active shooter response capabilities in the counterterrorism optic right now, and that's a big piece for me. So everybody all the U.S. law enforcement needs to start getting down with this right now, because, again, the threat is growing. Even though it's existential, it's going to continue to grow, and I think it's going to be as simple as active shooters starting to pop off, and that's going to fall on U.S. law enforcement. So Joe needs to let Israel do its thing right now. If they don't, it's going to get more dangerous here in the United States, and that's where I come out.
All right, Aaron Cohen.